Hi, I'm Hugh Whitmore, and welcome to episode 6 of Hugh Writes a Novel. Today is August 12th, 2017, and it's been about 12 total weeks I've been at this project, and guess what? I'm done. I'm very excited. It's very exciting to finish a novel. It's a hard work and very trying, but it's also a very fun journey. It's an emotional journey. It's an intellectual journey. It's just a great accomplishment in life. And I encourage you to, if you're going to start a novel, to get that thing started and get that thing finished, because it's quite an accomplishment. I've written 4 novels now and 2 nonfiction titles. I wrote a novel and a nonfiction title a few years ago too that weren't very good, frankly, and I took them off the market. So that's 6 completed books for me. It gets easier as you go along. That's an encouraging thing. And it should, because you get good at it, you get in the rhythm, and you get going. As far as this one goes, I think it's common for most writers. I was getting long. It was getting too long. I wanted to keep it from 50 to 55,000 words. As I said, I'm a little over 56,000 words. And I was going to be around 60,000 the way it was going. And so I took out a chapter. I cut back on some things I had planned to do. I had a 2-part ending. I had to cut one of those out, one of those parts out, and I was still satisfied with how it all wrapped up. So these are the things you'll have to do. I've encouraged you all along to be work with yourself in this regard and be flexible, because you're gonna get verbose. This is what happens as you get going. You have to write towards the low part of your planned number of words for your genre, because as the book gets going, your characters get going and they create a dynamic. It's just like life. You have a person and then you have another person, and they have 2 different personalities, but when they get together, a third thing happens, and it's called a dynamic, and that's what'll happen with your characters. And you really get into it, and you think of things that they might say, and scenes that might happen that didn't happen before, because it grew together and a dynamic happened. And so that happened in my book, and I had to cut some things back and get it to an acceptable number of words. So I'm happy with it, and it's 56,000 plus, but I'll probably cut that back a little bit too in my editing, which is the next step. Editing comes along, you get through all of your plot points. My last point, or the part of the novel that I was working on since the last update, was story structure point number 10, plot point 10, and that is where the hero acts. Very fun, very exciting, because it's just upwards with the action in the novel, and the hero's back going in full force after the epiphany, after learning their emotional lesson. It's a lot of fun. So got it done, but no rest for the weary, because now the editing comes. Now, I'm my own editor, and editing is sort of the topic today, because we're moving into that now. And the next one, I'll talk a lot about the editing. So let's talk about editing. It's a confusing thing. It's hard to do. It's hard to learn. I'm my own editor. I recommend that you be your own editor too, because even if you don't do it fully, like say you have a book contract and you have an editor, or you pay a professional editor, you still can save yourself a lot of money by doing most of the editing yourself. And I do all of my own editing. And here's the reason why. A number of years ago, I was writing my first novel, and I was acting as my own editor, but I sent out a copy of 3 of my chapters to 5 different editors. They'll do a little free test for you, most of them, and then you can see if you want to hire them. And I got back 5 different opinions, 5 very different, distinct opinions. Some of the things were the same. And I started to realize that editing is not a science, it's an art, and you get people with very strong opinions, and these people can wreck your writing if you're not careful. And another thing that I noticed is that they were very specific about some things. They would say, never, never do this. And then I would look at popular novels to see if that was true. For example, in very popular novels like Harry Potter, the Twilight series, and they were telling me not to do things ever that were all through Harry Potter and all through the Twilight series that the author had done. So sort of repeat here, you know, editors can ruin your writing and ruin your life. You need to create your own writing style and your own voice, and you need to know what you're doing, and you need to know what good editing is and what it isn't. because not everybody out there is a good editor. They're just people who are literate and have opinions, and they're not always right. And so learn how to edit your own work, and then you can stand up to your editor. And here's a good thing. If you need some editing, then you can work with your editor and say, no, I'd like this, and no, I wouldn't like that, and I agree with you on this and not that. But that's editing. It's art, it's not science. So learn to do your own editing. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And one of the things I wanted to talk about specifically is a thing called filtering words. And I don't know if you know this, but you should if you're writing novels. They're words that stand between your reader and your characters. And of course, we'll talk mainly about our main character. And words like saw, thought, watched, began. Began's a big one. Your character should never begin to do anything. They should just do it. Realize, looked, felt. These are words that are very common when we speak. You know, I looked over there and I saw a bird. Well, that's common in speech, and the way we speak ends up in our writing. And so we need to work these things out later. And I noticed in my editing that I use a lot of filtering words, and I have to go back and specifically spend a couple of days getting all of those out of there. And so the thing to remember on filtering words is, again, you don't want to freak out and take every single thing out. Every now and then your main character can begin to do something or decide on something, but you want to try to get most of them out of there because your reader doesn't need to know that your character looked and saw something. They just do it. And it's better writing, and it's better for you just to say, in this example, looked and saw a bird. Oh, your main character, a fluttering sound on the fence proved to be a bird preening its wings. And then it flew down and landed in a bird bath and got another dunking and went back up on the fence and did the same thing. I know I'm just sort of vamping here, but I didn't think it through. But my point is, what I got to was my character just describing this thing that happened as opposed to saying looked and saw. And this is the same thing. You don't want to have them begin doing something, they just do it. You don't want to have them think or thought, and he thinks something happened, they just do it. They don't he felt angry. No, you just display their anger. The hair stood up on his neck and his face turned red. Those are the things that happen, not felt or got angry. Just describe it. So those are filtering words. So I'm glad we talked about filtering words. You can look those up, look up a list of filtering words, look through your writing, and you'll find the ones you do the most, and you'll find that they're related to the things you say the most when you're speaking. Okay, that's great. So that's 3 months of writing, 56,000 plus words, novel finished, going into editing. For me, the editing is 2-3 weeks, I think. I just have to read it over several times. I'm not a big slash and burn editor because I go through and do read-throughs prior to my finishing, and a lot of my editing gets done there. So I'll get back in 2 weeks. I may even be done with the editing by then. We can talk a little bit about getting into the process of publishing a book and go from there. But to finish is a very exciting time.